The FBI had spent years hunting a Russian penetration inside the American intelligence community. Operations had collapsed. Human sources had vanished. Secrets known to only a narrow circle had somehow reached Moscow. Investigators looked outward, toward the CIA, toward foreign officers, toward almost anyone except the quiet man already inside their own walls. Robert Hanssen could read the Bureau's most sensitive files, search its internal databases, and watch the investigation move around him. The Russians knew him as Ramon Garcia. Many of his colleagues knew him as a colorless counterintelligence veteran in a dark suit. Neither side fully understood the man at the center of the breach. For more than 2 decades, Hanssen survived not by escaping the system, but by living inside it. To most people at FBI headquarters, he was easy to overlook. Hanssen was reserved, intensely religious, married, and the father of 6 children. His severe clothes and funereal manner reportedly earned him the nickname the Mortician. He did not resemble the cinematic image of a traitor. There were no glamorous embassy parties, no dramatic border crossings, no public declarations of allegiance to an enemy state. He was a career agent who spoke the language of security, understood the habits of investigators, and knew how much trust the Bureau placed in its own people. Behind that ordinary exterior was a deep appetite for money, control, and recognition. Hanssen appeared convinced that the men above him had failed to recognize his intelligence. Espionage gave him a private arena in which he could prove, at least to himself, that he was smarter than both Washington and Moscow. His first known venture into espionage began in 1979, only 3 years after he joined the FBI. While assigned in New York, Hanssen approached Soviet military intelligence and offered information for cash. This first betrayal did not continue uninterrupted. In the spring of 1981, his wife Bonnie discovered him in the basement with a communication from the Soviets. Hanssen later said he confessed to a priest and ended the relationship. For several years, the secret appeared buried, but repentance had not removed the desire that created it. In 1985, while supervising a foreign counterintelligence squad in New York, he volunteered again, this time to the KGB. The second approach would become far more disciplined, far more damaging, and far more difficult to detect. Hanssen understood that personal contact created vulnerability. A meeting could be photographed, a handler could be followed, a careless word could expose his accent, his workplace, or his family. So he built a relationship designed to keep even the Russians at a distance. He used aliases, most famously Ramon Garcia, and avoided meeting his handlers face to face. Instructions moved through encrypted messages and coded signals. Secrets moved through dead drops hidden in the Virginia suburbs, beneath a footbridge, near a utility pole, or at another location that looked meaningless to everyone passing by. Documents were sealed inside plastic garbage bags against rain and mud. Signals could be as small as chalk on a sign, or a thumbtack placed where only a trained observer would notice it. Cash and diamonds traveled back through the same silent system. The locations were almost insultingly ordinary. A parent could walk past one while pushing a stroller. A commuter could wait nearby without realizing that classified documents were hidden only yards away. That ordinariness was part of the protection. Hanssen did not need a shadowed restaurant or a diplomatic car. He needed a patch of woods, a predictable signal, and a bureau that was not monitoring its own trusted agent. He also withheld his true identity and employer from the Russians for years. Moscow understood the value of the material, but not necessarily the name of the man delivering it. In that narrow sense, Hanssen was spying on his handlers as carefully as he was spying for them. The human cost arrived early. Hanssen disclosed the identities of Soviet officers secretly cooperating with the United States, including Valery Martinov and Sergei Motorin. Aldrich Ames, the CIA officer who was also spying for Moscow, independently compromised the same men. Both were recalled to the Soviet Union, convicted of espionage, and executed. The distinction matters because Hanssen was not the only betrayal closing around them, but he knew exactly what naming an American source could mean. These were not abstract entries in a file. They were men with families, routines, fears, and no safe way to escape once Moscow summoned them home. Hanssen passed the information anyway, then returned to the life of a federal agent, sworn to protect the people whose deaths he had helped make possible. The damage spread far beyond human sources. Over the course of his espionage, Hanssen delivered thousands of pages of classified documents and numerous computer disks. The material covered American planning for nuclear war, developments in military technology, active counterintelligence cases, surveillance capabilities, and the methods used to recruit and protect sources. He also exposed a highly classified FBI technical operation beneath the Soviet embassy complex in Washington. The project had consumed enormous resources and depended on remaining invisible. Once Hanssen revealed the existence and location of the penetration, its intelligence value was effectively poisoned. Every conversation captured through it could be staged. Every silence could be deliberate. A secret system was still operating, but the adversary now knew where it was. That was the peculiar power of Hanssen's betrayal. A stolen document damages whatever is printed on the page. A compromised method damages every future operation that relies on it. Intelligence officers could no longer be certain which sources were alive, which channels were clean, or which Russian responses were genuine. Suspicion multiplied faster than evidence. After Aldrich Ames was arrested in 1994, the FBI and CIA recognized that another penetration probably remained. Yet the trail initially led them toward an experienced CIA officer who was innocent. For nearly 2 years, investigators concentrated on the wrong man, while Hanssen remained beyond serious suspicion. The Bureau's failure was not simply that Hanssen was brilliant. A later Justice Department review reached a harsher conclusion. He survived because FBI internal security was deeply flawed. Employees with extraordinary access were not subjected to the financial scrutiny or regular counterintelligence polygraphs that might have exposed unexplained money or deceptive behavior. Computer systems allowed broad searches without the kind of auditing that should have made his activity impossible to ignore. Hanssen exploited those weaknesses aggressively. He searched FBI databases for references to himself, his drop sites, and related investigations. Each search was a private alarm system. If the Bureau began moving toward him, its own files might warn him first. This is where the story becomes darker than the myth of a master spy. Hanssen did not defeat an all-seeing institution. He moved through gaps the institution had refused to close. Colleagues noticed unusual behavior at different points, but fragments of suspicion remained separated. His access was often greater than his job required. His computer activity was intrusive. Yet trust, bureaucracy, and poor information sharing turned warning signs into background noise. The FBI was built to penetrate hostile organizations, but it had not built an equally disciplined system for examining itself. Hanssen understood that contradiction and treated it as cover. By 2000, investigators had exhausted conventional paths. The breakthrough came when the United States obtained original Russian documentation concerning an unidentified American source. The records did not simply offer a rumor or a second-hand accusation. They contained physical and behavioral clues that could be compared against suspects. Material from a dead drop, fingerprints, examples of the source's language, and a recording of his voice. Piece by piece, the anonymous Russian asset began to sound like someone FBI personnel had known for years. The dry, slightly nasal voice on the recording belonged to Robert Hanssen. Prints associated with the material pointed in the same direction. Dates, assignments, and access began to align. The realization created a dangerous problem. Knowing Hanssen was probably the spy was not the same as proving it in court. If the FBI arrested him too early, he could deny everything and challenge the origin of the Russian material. If he sensed the investigation, he might destroy evidence, stop communicating, or disappear before agents could catch him acting for Moscow. Hanssen was also approaching retirement. The Bureau needed time, proximity, and control. So it created a fiction tailored to his ego. A new assignment at FBI headquarters, presented as an important technology and information security role. In January 2001, Hanssen entered a small office equipped with hidden cameras and microphones. The promotion was a cage, disguised as recognition. His new assistant, Eric O'Neill, had been assigned to observe him and report his movements. Outside the room, the investigation expanded to roughly 300 personnel. Teams followed Hanssen from the moment he left his Fairfax County home until he returned at night. Agents monitored his computer use, studied his routines, and waited for him to contact the Russians again. They could not let the target discover that the institution he had watched for years was finally watching back. For O'Neill, the danger was measured in inches. He worked beside a man believed to have betrayed American sources and studied the same habits that had protected him for decades. Hanssen was suspicious, technically capable, and familiar with surveillance. A misplaced object, a question asked too directly, or an unexplained delay could rupture the operation. Yet Hanssen continued probing FBI systems and guarding his personal electronics. Investigators were not merely collecting a history of espionage, they were trying to determine whether Ramon Garcia was still active. The answer soon became clear. Hanssen prepared another communication and arranged another dead drop. His final letter to the Russians contained an unintended confession of fear. Hanssen wrote that something had awakened the sleeping tiger. He sensed movement around him, but arrogance and habit pulled him forward. On Sunday, February 18, 2001, he drove to Foxstone Park near Vienna, Virginia. Inside his vehicle was a package containing highly classified information. The drop site, codenamed Ellis, lay beneath a footbridge over Wolf Trap Creek. Hanssen walked down the wooded path, carrying the documents inside a plastic bag. He placed the package under the bridge, turned away, and began walking back toward his car. This time, the woods were not empty. An FBI arrest team was already in position. Agents moved before the Russians could retrieve the package and took Hanssen into custody. He did not reach a border, an embassy, or a waiting aircraft. The system he had manipulated for years closed around him within sight of an ordinary suburban street. Hanssen was later reported to have asked, "What took you so long?" Whether the line was contempt, relief, or one final performance, it perfectly matched the image he had constructed. The betrayed genius disappointed by the people who had finally solved him. The evidence revealed an espionage career that had begun in 1979, stopped for periods, and resumed until the day of his arrest. Hanssen had received or been promised more than $1.4 million in cash, bank funds, and diamonds. He pleaded guilty to 15 espionage-related counts and agreed to extensive debriefings so the intelligence community could assess the damage. On May 10, 2002, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He spent the following years at the federal Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, and died there in 2023 at the age of 79. But the final verdict did not belong to Hanssen alone. The Justice Department concluded that he remained undetected, not simply because of exceptional tradecraft, but because of systemic failures inside the FBI. His case forced new attention on financial disclosure, polygraph testing, computer auditing, access controls, and the dangerous assumption that loyalty can substitute for verification. The Bureau caught its spy. It could not restore the executed sources, recover the operations Moscow had learned to distrust, or know with certainty how every stolen secret had been used. Robert Hanssen wanted to prove he was the smartest man in the room. What he actually proved was more disturbing. An institution can be strongest at its perimeter and weakest at the desk of someone it trusts. So where should the line be drawn between necessary trust and permanent surveillance inside an intelligence service? Tell us what you think in the comments. Subscribe to The Modern Ledger and continue with our next declassified case, because the Cold War did not end when the flags changed. Its secrets are still being entered in the ledger.